So how I know folks is I met Malika through Guadalupe, I think originally on Facebook, that Guadalupe had all these awesome friends, just like friend requested a bunch of them. But how I met Guadalupe was through my friend Shamel, who's at Yale Law School, that I've known since she was 15 and I was 16. And she and my friend Alani, who's on the executive board, both are friends with Guadalupe. And so that's how I met Malika, and really enjoyed meeting Malika. I felt like she was such a ally. I felt like she had a very similar vision. I felt very aligned with her vision, and I liked her strength of character, and I appreciate her being part of this movement and being so open. And so I feel like in alignment, and how I know Monique is I knew her from the Santo Daime, from the ayahuasca church. But I actually wasn't participating in the ayahuasca church. I had taken a break. And so I think I met her at like some community event or something for the Santo Daime, but I didn't meet her through the ceremony or through like the church at all. Like I totally met her randomly, I think at some gathering or some social thing. I don't even remember where I met you, Monique. But just have felt really blessed to know Monique and, just to cross paths with her in this life. She's an amazing human being. And, is probably one of the closest people to me as far as giving me direct feedback that I can hear. I feel like Monique has a very gentle voice, and she's very equipped and skilled at delivering tough information in kind ways. And she just has a lot of empathy and kindness in how she does her work. So I really appreciate that about her. And she's participated in some of our recent dialogues when we've talked about conflict resolution and dealing with, growing pains and things that are normal for grassroots organizations. And she's just been a brilliant facilitator for us in working through our issues and just has a very gentle approach. And so I just appreciate her so much. And Tatiana, I met through Michelle, who is now in Africa. And Michelle was just like the coolest person in the world. And then she went off to Africa, and she's from Jamaica. And I just adore Michelle. And then she introduced me to this person, Tatiana, and she was like, this person will probably help you out or is like more available than I am. Cause like, obviously I'm leaving the country. So Michelle like departed, but then like Tatiana was like more and more active in decrim and just, a friend and, getting to know her, and just has all these strengths that are so amazing as far as her ability to really analyze things. She's very equipped at handling analyzation in ways that have really benefited the local decrim movement. And then there's Solana, who's the busy mom of 4 and the grandmother of 2. Solana is someone that I met through working at United Indians. And I met my mentor, Pete Blair, there, and I met Alice too, and I met Alani Casey, who's on our executive board. And we were part of a cultural-based counseling program. It was really one of the first, I think, in the nation. And Pete Blair helped develop that, but it's using culture and music and things that go along with culture, drumming, just different things that have really helped these Native kids in that particular place. Yeah. Okay, so what I was going to share was that these are my thoughts. For me, this is spiritual work, so it feels different from like the cannabis movement. The energy for me feels different. So for me, it feels more like a spiritual metamorphosis, like the collective waking up. And when we think about the fungi and we think about the psilocybin and the threads of psilocybin and how there's like a micro network of like fungi that are talking to each other all around the earth all the time anyway, like I just feel like we're kind of waking up collectively. And for me, this feels like the second wave of the psychedelic revolution. Like when we think of the first wave, I feel like the first wave has like a lot of male overtones, white male overtones to it. and privilege, you know, that came from like people having the money and the access. So for me, this second wave of the psychedelic revolution feels very feminine. I feel a lot of feminine energy with it. And I resonate with that. And it's a style of feminism that for me includes everyone. That's non-exclusionary. So it's not like we're not highlighting and supporting women and allowing women to just be awesome and great and rock, but that the non-exclusionary. So for me, the feminism embodies like, let's look at race, let's look at privilege, let's, you know, embody all those things, because I think feminism can incorporate all those things. So for me, it's like this time of the wise crones, you know, the divine feminine, the witches, whatever you want to call it, but just really seeing these women interact in ways historically as far as sharing power and leading in different ways than I think has been taught to them. And for me, the metaphor that I like to use is like, I feel like we got dropped off on a planet and all of our tools were from the men, and all of our, you know, ideas were from the men, and all of everything had been controlled by the men. They controlled the laws, they controlled the land, they controlled everything. So the spaceship is built by the man that we got, you know, we got to this planet. But now that the men are gone, like maybe the men just left for some reason, now we're just with these women. And I feel like now culturally, or where we are in like human consciousness, I feel like the women are turning around to one another on that planet, and they're like, well, we don't have to use things the way that they were left here. Like we could actually disassemble them and make our own thing and be more creative with it, you know? So that's where I feel like we're at in human history. I feel like we're like looking at the, you know, what we're left with, the patriarchy, the whatever, the tools that we've been given. And we're kind of like, hey, how can we make this work, but dismantle it and do something different with it? So it's a different energy, it's a different voice. And I think, you know, historically women have been taught to be very pitted against one another and very catty and, you know, just taught to take each other down and really not trust one another and different things. And so what bothers me, I think, the most and gets me the angriest is when I talk to folks about how this has never been done in human history before. I'm like, if you look at the psychedelic movement, it's women have never led in that psychedelic movement before, ever, like ever in any significant like grassroots way. Like there's no big famous women in psychedelics, like we worship like all of these white men, but there's women have just like never done this in human history before. So in terms of the magnitude of that, I feel like we need to acknowledge what a big deal it is and how women may not have had like heroines or leaders that have come before, right? So a lot of us are plowing that, you know, furrow for the first time or whatever. And I had, well, maybe it happened with Plato, because like supposedly Plato went off to talk to like some witchy women or something. But as far as grassroots organizing, we've never seen women in these roles before. And for me, that's huge. And I want that acknowledged. And I feel like sometimes I bring that up and people are like, oh yeah, but we don't need to make a big deal about it. Or like, oh yeah, you're right. That's pretty cool. And it's like, no, dude, like this is the first time this is ever happening in human history ever, that women are ever leading in the psychedelic revolution, like together. Like this is insane. This is the first time in human history. Like this is huge. You know, we should be celebrating. This is amazing. And when we had first met with Lisa Herbold in April to try to talk to her about, you know, decriminalizing these medicines, I kept texting everyone in our little like group and being like, hey, I want to ask this question of Lisa. Hey, I want to push back on this thing that Lisa said. Hey, you know, whatever. And I felt like I just kept getting squashed. Like people kept just being like, shh, 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 quiet in the back, you know? And I was like, okay. And so I kind of went into meek mouse mode for a while. Like I was hurt by some of that behavior. And I was just like, oh, okay. So no one wants to hear my opinions or my questions or whatever. So I'll just, you know, crawl off and be defensive and, you know, mope. But we had an interesting thing happen in Decrim where we met with Carlos, but we also met with like a lot of men in our local chapter. And at that point, it was a very different picture. Decrim for that meeting was me and a bunch of white men and Carlos. So that was it. I was the only woman there. And we were having this meeting and these men were talking, our group locally, were talking about how we needed to like import like a Dennis, like a Terrence McKenna kind of guy, like a guy with like a lot of charisma, you know, that could just like lead this movement and really, you know, empower people and get them like really impassioned. And so they were like literally talking about, they're like, we need to like recruit someone from outside of Seattle to come in. And they were literally saying like Dennis McKenna and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, like I'm just like listening and everything. And then at the end of that, Carlos said that he saw leadership potential here in our group, you know, and I spoke with him later on and felt very encouraged by him. But at one point, one person in our group said, can we talk about the elephant in the room? And it was about the lack of leadership. And I thought the elephant in the room was that it was a bunch of white men and one woman, one white woman, you know, I thought that that was the elephant. I was getting really excited when one person said that, because I thought, oh, great, we're going to talk about real stuff. But that wasn't the elephant they were talking about. And so for me, that was really hard, because I think that if I hadn't had the guts to reach out to Carlos, I would have been muted. I would have continued to stay muted, and I wouldn't have stepped into a leadership role. So for me, that was kind of a turning point. But I think it takes a lot of guts and a lot of determination and grit to weave your way into power in these systems that everyone is probably aware of. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share at the when we do our interview. So Monique, do you want to talk about why you're in the Santo Daime, or what drew you to this path a little bit, or how you see your role in this community, like how maybe that's changed? Because, you know, you're a guardian, so you're in this position of leadership, and you're supposedly like co-leading this point. And you know, you've had a lot of pressure put upon you by political aspects, you know, going on. And you're doing a lot with women, because, you know, the women may not be as observable in the Santo Daime as far as leadership or, you know, presence.
In this region anyway.
Right, right. No, I think when I think about, there's a woman in Portland that leads a huge ayahuasca community, and Monique knows her, and I like her style of leadership. So I often think about her when I think about like role models.
So do I.
She's friggin' awesome. And can we just talk for a minute about why we think she's so friggin' awesome? Because you and I have had these conversations, but like.
And what's her name?
Alex.
Alexandria.
Yeah, Alex. Remember how you talked before about how some people thought she was mean or cold because, like, from a distance she's kind of poised or composed. She doesn't jump into doing all this caretaking.
Well, everybody has their own style, but, you know, from my observation, and it's just like when you're in leadership, you're like birthing into leadership, you know, because you're growing at the same time, you know, into the role of what leadership is for your community. Because in my observation of it, and my current understanding of it, is leadership is in communication or in relation to who you're fellowshipping with, you know, the congregation, you know, and being of service to that, and doing the work, because it involves like doing a lot of work, because a lot of times people project a lot of things on you, and you have to find a way to navigate the terrain with grace, and being very grounded and stuff like this. So yeah, and I don't know, even though I have this position, it's still fairly new, and I still I feel like I'm new to that, because I'm just in my own world, doing something that I love to do, something that I feel guided to do in my life. I don't really sit back and say like, oh, I'm this woman and I'm in this movement of psychedelics doing this thing. I've never really thought about it that way until, you know, until this movement, you know.
No, I know for you, it's your life, and this is who you are, and that you're not into like the labels of activist, or, you know, that's not really necessarily how you identify.
Yeah, but I do see, you know, stepping out of it, I do see the importance of it, because I do see that I want the roads to be cleared for people to receive this healing if they feel so called to use this medicine to heal themselves. Like I was led on this journey to do this work. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do it, and I, and do it in a way where I didn't feel like I had to like it would jeopardize my livelihood, you know, as doing something like illegal that would would harm my lifestyle or end up in jail or something ridiculous.
Right. And so because you're part of a legal ayahuasca church,
Yeah.
you are currently afforded that protection.
Yeah. And I think that, I think a lot about, like my friends and family back home, like they may not, like I feel very blessed to have this opportunity to work, to do this work. And, and I see the benefits in the importance of, doing the work of making it obtainable for other people without them jeopardizing their livelihood or going to jail or having
Totally.
stigmatism associated with it. Because, there is a will or something that's changing and turning in our world, if we're aware of it or not. And so I think all of us are working to be more conscious in our lives. Like people are hearing the call of doing that, and we need medicine sometimes to do that work outside of our regular standard way of doing things. It's got to be something like really radical than the way that we've been indoctrinated into, to kind of shake things up and create an opening for change or a different perspective. So that's kind of like why while I'm here, that's what I can speak to. I really can't speak to, I mean, like, I'm like this girl from Ohio, I'm like, I've never really done a psychedelic. I mean, like I've done like weed, but I've never really done any drugs or ethnogens or any kind of thing like this before, so I can't really speak to, so I'm not really in this culture or have these understandings, like maybe like people can talk about like the history and all these characters that are inside this movement. I don't have that awareness. I'm not coming from that place.
Yeah, but it's interesting if maybe you're not drawn to it, because sometimes I'm like, oh, should I learn about some old white men that participate?
I know. I feel like
No.
I'm part of me. I'm like, I should not even be doing this interview because I think I might be a detriment to your group, because I like don't know like this.
No.
I'm like totally not like in. I'm not like, man. So I don't know. But I could speak. I could speak.
You're gonna fail the psychedelic test for not knowing,
yeah, like
not knowing the explorers, the conquerors, the.
I don't even know half the acronyms to all this shit. I'm like, okay. But yeah, but I think that's kind of good, because I think the majority of the people I think that we want to reach or we see like this benefiting are from the people that may not even be aware of sitting with these types of medicines, because it's been so demonized for a reason, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been kept from specific communities for a reason, whereas other pushed into those communities. And like, I think when people like who've been like, given the shitty drugs versus the drugs that would have like helped them and healed them, like really fully wake up to like how bad they got duped. Like, I'm just like, there's gonna be some serious anger, because this is like sad.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think when someone is when there's a liberation there, when there's a freedom there, it creates an opening. I think anger is put by the wayside.
Can you speak at all to some of the stuff, some of the stuff, Monique, about like within the Santo Daime talking about like spiritual protection and the idea of like, you know, because people don't understand like that entities or different concepts around entities and you know, mediumship. Do you mind just touching on that for a moment?
Well, within the Daime, it's collective shamanism, you know, like when traditional ways of doing it, you have the shaman that does the singing and calling in the beings, and everybody like receives their healing. But within the Daime, everybody sings. Everybody is in that place of service, and everybody is internally doing their work, and the container is set. As the container is set to bring about illumination, we make a declaration of what we're aligning with, which is Christic consciousness, the light, and to be of service to and welcome the beings that come in to receive healing. Like we say this prayer and make this declaration. And so intention is a big thing. And then especially attention is even very powerful when a group or a collective group intend upon one thing and they're focused on this center of light to bring this light. So that anchoring of this light and the songs that we sing are received from the astral and call certain healings. And so I think that's where the protection is in the prayer and in the intention. And then also how the container is set and how each person initiate or the person who comes visit, like this is the you know, this is the intention, and we embody the intention to do good to the best of our ability, and we everyone learns and receives things and stuff like this. In regards to mediumship, we have certain works that open up mediumship. What I find, the people do their own internal work in regards to mediumship. You know, there's conversations that we have about our experiences, but in the work there's like no like particular like verbal, you know, no one's speaking to someone about their experience. People have their own experience, and we have like a hands off kind of approach. You know, we don't really entangle in other people's stuff. We just provide a safe place for people to do their work. There are some people who have these who feel called or have a study in helping other mediums through their process, and we have some protocols that we provide if someone is experiencing a mediumship where a being is coming in for healing, and we have certain songs that help with that. But understanding one's mediumship is as far as I've observed, is one's own personal journey and walk. And then, you know, you can ask other experienced mediums about how to navigate that terrain. But there's not a lot of talking in the works because, you know, people are very suggestive, you know, and we're very sensitive and vulnerable. So our just focus is on our prayers and the singing, and there's just little talking. There's no talking to someone or like
And do you mind touching on real quick?
therapy.
Do you mind touching on real quick that for some folks, I've certainly witnessed this, psychedelics have not helped their life. Like for whatever reason, that's just not what they need to be doing at this point in their life. And it certainly isn't necessarily helping their mental health or something. And just, you know, for every person, they need to know that. And any person who's talking about it needs to also own that some people aren't going to necessarily benefit or.
Not all medicines are for everyone. Like you know, like there's like in nature, there's so many medicine, and just like that medicine may not agree with you, you know. But I think there's two things that could go on. Like, you know, we have we've we've been in a society like where there's a quick fix. Like I'm going to take this pill and everything is going to be solved, and but there's work involved in one's healing. Like even with, you know, you take this medicine, there's still work you have to do in your life, you know. You can receive some and get caught in the fantasy and not really do the work, you know. And then also there's some who are where that particular medicine may not be right for them, for the way they orient or way that their system is, or whatever. Because, you know, there's many medicines, many medicines out there, many. And some don't involve psychedelics, you know. But everybody is on their own journey to discover this, and that's like the whole process of healing. You know, it's a journey. And to think that even me being a dimista, like it ends here. Like there's work to be done, you know.
Solana, do you mind sharing?
Yeah, so I was just taking notes to what Leo, you were saying, and Monique, and I thought about speaking to my direct lineage to Mother's Breath, being the first AIDS, the indigenous peoples. You know, we've always seen plants as our first teachers, and there's creation stories to that explain our relationship to them. There's even a creation story behind the clan society of the Raven clan being the one that brought the sun and being the change maker. Sometimes they're seen as a trickster, but it's always for the betterment of the human family. And the catalyst to frog transforming into raven was a mushroom, was an entheogen plant. I'm hoping to find artwork that shows it, because our art is the main document of these things other than the creation stories. So I have a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch, I have 5 different family members who are like really trying to help me out here. I'm also wanting to speak to, I haven't, so now that I know there's 5 of us, I'm planning to have maybe my speaking time down to like 7 minutes total, but then of course I could chime in whenever. But I feel like it's important for us to have some kind of allotment of time for each person for our narrative and our, I mean, the 5 of us are completely different people. It sounds like we're all identifying as women, and I think that, like, I would love it if we would all speak to, like, have a few seconds of what we're saying to speak to that. Like, I really liked what you were saying, Leo, about the history and the first movement being just white men, and how now my relationship with Decriminalized Nature International is being one of their advisors, and they're so receptive and open and kind, and like they're really entrusting with, you know, with me being a woman of color in providing certain advice. I think that's one of the most important things to speak to in this podcast is being a woman. I feel like we can really harness that energy. We can really harness our eighth direction, our womb, our ability to create life or sustain it, whether we have or not. We have that as part of our physical makeup, and so we have something that men will never have. And if we do it correctly, or if we can course our language and our posture, all the different intellects that we have to help with that narrative, I feel like this movement can really go a long ways in helping people recover their highest selves and helping people recover their true relationship, not only with Mother Earth, but with each other. And I feel like that's what's been missing. And when I listen to, like, I'm not going to talk about this, but this is just to reaffirm this idea of us speaking to this part, is all the thinkers, like the great philosophers and those guys, they're all men mostly. None of them speak to the spiritual aspect. None of them speak to that evidence that only we can tap into. Like, we're the ones who can fill up with double the amount of blood and double the amount of water and carry more than one heartbeat. So we have all these other intellects that we can tap into to fuel that potential, to fuel and encourage those relationships. And so I'll speak to my direct lineage. I'll talk about how entheogens have recently been reclaimed as mother's breath and the importance of that. Being a first people or indigenous people in my own territory. I might even mention like the land acknowledgement aspect and how inviting folks to reconcile their own relationships with where they stand, with where they sit, with where they work, with where their family is, and how that's really radical all in itself. And I get it. I mean, I know that I'm the only one in my entire family, and my grandmother had 28 kids, so that's hundreds and hundreds of cousins. And then my mom's side, my grandma had 9 kids, so that's even more family that I'm related to blood-wise. And how, you know, today in 2020, I guarantee I'm the only one encouraging this relationship. I know that, and like, that's totally okay. And it's for everybody. And it's non-political, it's non-biased, it's so inclusive. My main goal is to advocate for our relationships with our plant teachers without objectifying or exploiting them. Inviting folks to access, you know, themselves to be invited to partner with Mother's Breath, and that it's definitely not for everybody. That it has exploitation, exploitation. You know, to be okay with the light and the dark. Like the darkness never exploits the light, and the light doesn't exploit the dark. So there's a lot of probably metaphorical storytelling like language that I'll use just to keep reaffirming Mother's Breath and to keep reaffirming being an Indigenous First Peoples woman, grandmother, with a stake in the ground for this movement, and that I'm like, that's my life, and it doesn't turn off. Like, it doesn't go away when I'm not on the phone. Like, my whole family can say pretty much everything that I've been saying as well, and how important that is for our own identities, male or female, and how inviting it can really be for chaos, for reconciliation, for truth. And that, you know, just knowing some of those creation stories and knowing some of the clan societal ways of the land which we're working on and living on and raising our families on, that's what keeps us warm at night, is some truth. So I don't know. It's not like all scripted yet, but I feel like it's really important to me if at least 2 or 3 of us can speak to being a woman in this movement. I feel like that's a really big deal. And I feel like, you know, after talking, like, I've been in so many Zoom meetings and so many works around King County, Pierce County, and the North Sound ECH, and I've talked to folks out of Montana and South Dakota and New Mexico and just all these other regions of healthcare folks, and it's always being remembered that for all the First Peoples, the Indigenous folks, that even if there was like chiefs or like men empowered to do like all the negotiating or work, there was the grandmothers that were advising them. Like, that's what helped them in their voice. That's what helped them not be silenced. That's what helped them, was the grandmothers, was the women behind them, like telling them what to say, how to do it. They're the ones who, I mean, if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't be standing up straight, or, you know, like, they wouldn't watch what they said, or you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like that's one of the main parts for me in wanting to be on this call and do this work, is like, that needs to be reclaimed, and that needs to be proclaimed, and that needs to be said big time and reaffirmed and resaid and resaid and resaid. That now is not a time to be meek. Now is not a time to be timid or have a posture of any sorts like that, because I know that my aunties and my mom, who's resting in heaven with, you know, other moms, that's what they've already done that. They've been there, they've done that. And I feel like this is happening for a reason right now. And that it's time for like a spiritual justice and emotional justice. And we're the ones who can speak to that freedom.
Malika or Tatiana, do either one of you want to go?
I can go. Yeah, I haven't, same as probably most of us, I haven't really come up with like a script or exactly what I would like to say, but I think for me first, I went to just how I came, like how this came into my life, and it felt like it was just by chance, and how reflecting on that and realizing the lack of access for so many people. So that was a big reason for why I got involved with doing the work, is because I don't want this to be something that people just happen across. You know, it would be so beautiful if it was something that people, you know, it was something that you got, it was a part of your upbringing. It's like, well, this is an option. This is an opportunity for you to explore. You know, this is something that that has a really long history of use, and we know nothing about it still. So that is a big reason why I'm interested in doing the work. And of course, the other reason is because of my own what I've gained from it, my own healing and learning that I've gained from it. And I wanted to speak to Solana actually touched on it, which is the work that I'm trying to do is for myself is like learning to step forward and being seen.
Yay.
So yeah, so that's it's an especially hard task, I would say, for us, because we don't necessarily see that all the time in the world that I grew up in, at least, you know. The people that I saw stepping forward and being seen and being heard were loud, were typically male, you know, were all of the above that people have mentioned. So there's no time better than now to like continue to practice that and to be amongst the first, or, you know, at least I don't want to say that women weren't a part of the movement in the past, but they weren't their stories weren't the ones that were told. Their stories weren't the ones that were shared, you know. So we have a real opportunity here to not only be a part of the movement, but also to be seen in that way. And I wanted to speak to how there's so much beautiful stuff. Like, I know social media has been pooped on a lot lately, but there's so much beautiful stuff that I found out there with people stepping forward and like doing above board practice with like different other medicines that aren't illegal, you know, so to speak, illegal, and inviting people to come forward. And there are spaces out there for people of so many different identities and intersecting identities. So I thought I wanted to touch on that a little bit as well, and how like there's real opportunity there for collaboration. I see this as like, I see our particular flavor to what we're doing as being very collaborative and wanting to like, as difficult as it can be, wanting to weave everyone in. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing with it, that comes with challenges, but I do think it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there for collaboration and for growing our voice, and yeah, being heard. And like something that is really important to me is that this has always been something that was, when you have access to it, there's not like a lot of I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but there's not like, there's knowledge and wisdom that's being cast aside because it doesn't fit a Western medical model. And I think that that's a travesty. That's wrong. And that there's a lot of knowing, and there's a lot of evidence to show that, you know, the things that people are, so to speak, proving now with science it's already existing. It's already there. You know, the stories are there. And like, to discount stories, I think is, you know, is one of the things that our culture has kind of lost, you know, because I think there's a underlying lack of trust ultimately, you know, in stories, because of the traumatic history that we have in this country, because stories have been used to quell other people's power, you know, and erasing them as well. So I would say that that's some of the stuff that I would like to talk about, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it in a like weave it all in there in a few minutes, you know. Yeah. Yeah, that's me. That's all I have to say.
Yeah,
at
no,
the
I was
moment.
just thinking, Tatiana, about like the comment you had made about the Pacific Northwest and oral culture, and you're like, just the idea, it's so presumptive and it's so condescending to assume like the people here did not have a connection with this medicine and know these plants and fungi here. It's just for me, it's just rude. It's like Murakami or whatever the guy is that just wrote the book, and he wrote the book about how so many of these entheogens are woven into like the Bible and woven into all these stories, and like people have been using them to connect with God and touch God and go to these places. Like Plato, you know, went off and did all this stuff, but so much of that is story related, especially for indigenous cultures. And I just find it so rude. And I think we had just talked about that, or just so presumptive to assume that that folks here weren't connected or didn't know. And, you know, just because it's not written down in a book, and just how fucking crazy that It's like, that's so fucking crazy that it's like in a book attesting to the fact that they knew. So they didn't know. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really challenging because I would say that it's just so challenging because stories are powerful, and that doesn't mean that people can't use them for harm either, you know? So to discredit them wholesale, I think is we're losing out on a lot there. Just because, you know, we're raised up in a culture that looks at things very much from one lens,
Yeah.
really.
So Malika?
Yes. Well, my motivation to engage in this process initially with everyone in this particular group of people, I think I didn't know that Guadalupe was the reason why we connected. I actually have never met her in real life. We are, but we get along really well every time we've ever talked. And so that's funny to me that, you know, like this person that I don't even know in real life. I know her partner. I used to work with them. But anyway, but yeah, so but my motivation to be here is to, you know, it's part of ending the drug war. It's you and I reached out to you around some legalization work that I'm doing, legalization and safe supply work that I'm doing here in Washington State. It's a social justice movement for me. I wanted to see what y'all were talking about from a harm reduction perspective. I have been aware of the power of psychedelics for quite some time. Also working with people that are, you know, using other drugs in a way that's problematic for them, and seeing the relief that they got when they were using psychedelics was always something that was very enlightening to me. I think that people should have access to whatever they need in order to be able to cope, and that ideally, you know, we can look at substances as providing healing, and we also need to look at the broader systems that impact people and change them in order to be able to create healing. And I feel like this particular group of individuals that are coming together, that seems to be a deep part of where everybody's coming from, and increasing options and access for people is something that I'm always going to work towards. I have done a lot of policy work and around drug use, harm reduction, and, you know, access to healthcare. I worked on the Medicaid transformation here in Washington, you know, in Washington State, in the region that I live in Southwest Washington. Organizing with women is something that I've always done, and I think that it's always been a huge tenet of the harm reduction movement as well. Again, though, white men are the ones that oftentimes have gotten the attention for the work. The thing that I appreciate about this particular group of people is that there's an intentionality around trying to address these issues and work together in a way that I think female and indigenous and people of color often in Black community, that leadership looks different. It's not something that's prescribed. It is a collective process. And what you're good at is what you lead in, and that we all bring our strengths to the table. And that's something that I really appreciate about the way that this group works together, and that we leave room and grace for each other to be able to learn from each other, get to know each other, and complement each other. So that is why I am staying at the table, and that I want to continue to do this work, because I think everybody here is powerful and dynamic, even though I don't know everybody very well. But that this is important work to be able to dismantle the oppressive systems that have been built up to intentionally harm Black and Brown people, and also to be able to hopefully make access to substances that can help to actually start healing people's souls and bodies. So that, and then at the same time, we have to do the work to dismantle these systems so that healing doesn't just get broken again. So that's what I think. That's probably, and then I'll probably focus some more on some policy stuff. If that.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, I might touch on the bigger vision of like Entheo and stuff, but at the same time, like it's only an hour. And really what I originally had asked him about was to focus on like women in leadership and how we are all working together. Because that feels super special to me. And I feel like this needs to be honored in human history. This is really special.
Well, and I think that, you know, what we're doing is even beyond feminism, in my opinion, because I think feminism is real problematic in the United States, frankly, and that we are showing what functional relationships can achieve. And that it happened, and that it's happening between a group of dynamic and powerful women, and that we're showing up in ways that complement and that love and heal each other because we love ourselves, so we can love each other, you know, and that we recognize all of our, you know, individual growth and path. And if we don't understand something about another person that we're witnessing, we, like I said earlier, we have a grace for each other, that we're willing to sit in that space of tension and grow in it. And we happen to be working to make that there's access to this medicine that can help people in real and transformative ways. And it's actually legitimate to the needs that they have.
Sounds great.
It's crazy to me that we have this opiate crisis that's caused by the pharmaceutical companies, and yet these medicines that would heal people and allow people to not be addicted to the opiates, they're illegal and they're classified as like the most dangerous drugs. Like, that's fucking insane.
Well, that's capitalism, and that's the war on drugs. I mean, we have access to, I mean, the United States grows coca. We go and spread pesticide on other people's coca plants so that they can't individually profit from them in other countries. But Coca-Cola company grows their own coca and distills the flavor from it and puts it in the Coca-Cola that people drink every single friggin' day, and then sell the analgesic leftovers to the pharmaceutical company. I mean, like, it's capitalism, you know, like we have our own opiates. We have developed, you know, that is capitalism run rampant. Like, it's like, we can't just focus on, you know, having medical models or having, you know, these, because the racism and the exploitation is through all of our different systems, whether it's the family separation system, also known as, you know, DCFS, if it's, you know, our social service systems that say, you know, that dehumanize people, if it's our, you know, medical systems that say that certain people should be able to get certain type of care and that other people, they shouldn't be able to get, you know, care. And we should be able to traumatize people all the way throughout, you know, because they are who they are and because of what they've experienced, you know, that this movement, from what I'm seeing, this particular group of people, because frankly, now I'm getting a little maybe off topic, or maybe I'm on topic, I don't know. I was a little wary about working with folks in the psychedelic movement because I've seen a lot of people, they want to be like love and light, but then they're like, you know, oppression and violence, you know, so it's like in the way that they discount people and that they erase their experience. And
Oh, that's still out there. We have to be careful
I know
about
that's
that.
what I'm saying. Yeah, but I'm saying that's why I engage with this group of people that are doing this work in this time, is that you all have demonstrated to me, even though I don't know you know, any of you very well, but you've demonstrated to me a spirit that is contrary to that. And that is why, you know, it's important, I think, that we work together. And you see the oppression that is within all of the systems.
Said about like, it's not like people that in this movement or whatever, like that, my shit's complete. Like, I'm still working on stuff. Like, it's not like you get to this point where you're like, well, now I've got,
I'm doing like I see some people like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And then they start this this thing of judging people and putting people in categories like, oh, I do medicine work and they don't, and or
Yeah.
I'm a vegan and like I don't eat meat and all this other stuff. Oh, you eat meat. Like, oh my God, it's like this thing that
Really.
we do with judgments, and it's like a crazy, wacky thing. Like,
Yeah, I know. I read about, and then I have seen it in folks who work with medicine who, this lady wrote about be careful in working with medicines because your ego. And then I was like, well, more like she-go for some folks, like he-go or she-goes for some people.
yeah,
Because I definitely feel that and all the harm that goes with that, those kind of judgments or objectification or communications of violence, I think
yeah.
more like is, it's like,
You have to you have to like walk very consciously within
mhm,
inside yourself and how you walk. I mean, but I mean, that's the work if you're doing medicine work or not. In or not, if you're doing medicine work or not. It's just like with
mhm,
medicine work, it's like it's more illuminated.
mhm,
Just really more illuminated.
But you mentioned that grounding thing, and like I've been working really hard on like own your voice, and even Tatiana brought it up, like own your voice. Like instead of like the woman that's been taught as a little girl, like always like, is it okay to speak now? Am I offending anyone now? Don't piss anyone off. Don't make them angry. And now,
Being nice. Oh my
right,
God, that is like
right. So I was spiraling after the Tatiana stuff. Like I was spiraling, and then now I feel like I've regained a little bit of my self-esteem, or like my, like I don't need to take on this, like, and I think that's so liberating when you're like, I don't need to take that on, like that's someone else's stuff or that's whatever. But just like right now, like it's amazing when you realize like I just want to lead and not like apologize constantly, and I just want to lead and tell these fuckers what I think needs to happen, and stop being like, oh, can I say it this way? Or is this less aggressive? Or is this less like am I being sensitive enough to their feelings? And like, I'm just in this place right now where I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to be me. And like, let me know if you think it's fucking rude as fuck, but like, I'm just going to,
but what if they bring it to your attention that it is rude? Then what are you going to do?
I'll work on it, or I'll whatever. But I think if you are living your life in constant fear of offending someone, well, I just think these are things I observe for women in leadership more than men. I feel like men give direction. Steve Jobs was like a fucking asshole, right? But everyone fucking worships that he like created Apple.
mhm,
I think it's almost like navigating, like being on a surfboard, because it's like you can't lean too much into one way or lean too much in the other way, meaning passive aggressive. It's like a balance. It's like this delicate balance, because ultimately, the way that we communicate or getting to know and harmonizing with someone takes a little give and take and a little navigation. Just like there's some navigating and so there's some ebb and flow, doesn't mean that it's co-opting your expression. It's because you're in this thing, and it's like the cultivation of relationships. So it's just like tending to a garden. When a plant is showing you that what you're giving it is not allowing it to thrive, you need to kind of like contemplate, like, oh, maybe I'm watering this plant too much, or or maybe I'm not giving this plant too much water. So you make the adaptation, but it doesn't take away from who you are. You're just adapting, because ultimately you want your garden to grow. So maybe kind of like think of it from that perspective, and have it, because you got to kind of like finesse and maneuver things, because you want to bring people along, because this movement is not on one person.